The USA is tightening secondary sanctions against Russia. Argentina starts showing black on its balance sheet. Moldova is seeing threat from Russia and acts. England's economy is getting switched to wartime mode. Lukashenko is after inventing a superweapon, lightsaber. Mother Nature is angry, volcanoes erupting, huge hail falling from the sky. AstroZeneca, the vaccine maker, admits the truth, finally. And the biggest news of the week? Well, there are two biggest news of this week. Georgia is on fire, instigated by Russia, and V-Day, the holiday that was celebrated in all post-Soviet countries, is cancelled pretty much everywhere. Howdy, howdy, friends. My name is Konstantin, and welcome to Inside Russia, where usual Russia is explained by the unusual Russian, me. Every Wednesday, I give you my take on important world's news that you will not find anywhere else. Let's jump straight to news number one. Let's start with something from the big boys today. That comes from the USA and China. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken just finished a 3-day visit to China. One of the main openly declared tasks of American diplomacy there was to get Beijing renounce the assistance attributed to it by Russia in the development of Russian military-industrial complex. Meanwhile, it would be naive for Washington to hope for Beijing completely give up supporting Russia, as well as for solving other acute problems in countries' bilateral relations. And the visit was tough and reflected the current state of the relations between the two countries. Moreover, Chinese foreign minister welcoming address to Mr. Blinken was more like a grilling rather than actual welcoming. Antony Blinken presented the Chinese a draft of further secondary sanctions against Chinese banks working with Russia, as much as up to cutting them off access to American dollar. Washington wants Russia's money transfers with China to become even more complicated. Russian propaganda is, of course, ridiculing and laughing. Ho, the USA can't do that. China will kick America's butt for attempting to do that. China is a Russian friend. You know, the usual of Russian propaganda. Well, I'm telling you, it's getting old. Well, I guess Russian people are still buying it. But you know what? This particular visit, this case, shows us how the big picture of diplomacy works. The USA is taking stepping stones, applying and enforcing secondary sanctions all over the world. And this is it wasn't the first visit, not the first time Antony Blinken visited China. He did visit at the end of last year, in December, with the same goal to tighten secondary sanctions against Russia. And as a result, the Chinese banks stopped accepting Russian payments in February on Chinese New Year. And do you know what happened in March? The exports of machinery, equipment, spare parts to Russia from China decreased by 15% year on year to $2.9 billion. Russian propaganda can laugh whatever it wants to, and Russian people can keep on buying that. But the USA is effective in suffocating Putin, slowly but surely. Americans, you can see exactly how your diplomacy works, and you can see exactly how your taxpayers' dollars are spent. and I think they're well spent. Another example is Turkey, whose exports to Russia fell in early 2024. The same situation. And again, it's Antony Blinken's effective work. He visited Turkey and see what happened a few months later. Moreover, the energy ministers of the G7 countries agreed to continue working on a complete abandonment of Russian natural gas imports. When meeting in Turin, Italy, they assured that they will keep on making progress in reducing dependence on fossil fuels of Russian Federation in general. So keep laughing, Russian propaganda, and you Russian people keep on buying that crap you're fed. Meanwhile, the circle around you is getting smaller. And that's up to you to stop it. The next news is very positive, and it comes from Argentina. Last week, it was announced that Argentina is becoming NATO global partner, and this week, Javier Milei, the new president, announced that Argentina has achieved a budget surplus for the first time in 20 years. I quote, "I want to inform you that the public sector registered a surplus of 275 billion pesos in March of 2024, thereby reaching a surplus of 0.2% of GDP in the first quarter of the first time in almost 20 years. I unquote. This guy becomes a non-establishment, independent president, and he instantly labeled as a nutcase by Argentinian elites. Well, a few months after, he shows the results. At first, he declines to join BRICS, a good choice for Argentina. Second, he establishes a relationship with NATO, also a good choice for Argentina. And third, he shows budget surplus, and that's like a miracle. You know, no matter what they say, the guy shows results. And I think that so far, Javier Milei seems all right. The next news comes from the Republic of Moldova. Let me remind you, Moldova has become a hotspot, the next target, possibly the next target of Russia. At least a lot of fingers are pointing to that. Moldova is, basically a young, democratic, independent, and it's heading to European Union that is heading in that direction. And Russia doesn't like that. It wants Moldova in Russia's orbit. So Russia has plans to create a coup d'etat in Moldova, what it seems. I don't have any insight, but I'm just using common sense and logic. It's pretty obvious because Russia, under Russian patronage, last week, a puppet government led by a criminal guy, convicted felon from Moldova, Ilan Shor, was organized. So basically a congress took place, a congress of so-called Moldovan opposition, where they created a political party called The Victory. And I talked about it in more details 1 week ago on the previous Wednesday, World's News Update. Check it out right here. I'm going to put a link. So the last week, the Prosecutor General's Office of Moldova, acting upon that action of creating the Victory Party in Moscow, so the Prosecutor General of the country stated that it's seeing the signs of high treason in creating the Victory Party by the opposition, so-called opposition in Moscow. Acting Prosecutor General considered this a threat to the security of the state. And I think he's 100% right. Moldovians defending their country, defending its sovereignty and freedom is pretty darn good. If Moldovians don't do that, if they stay passive, then one day they will wake up and find Russian tanks on their streets and Russian puppets in their parliament. You go, Moldovians. You go. The next news comes from the home of the best tea in the world. Cheers, Great Britain. This is good. English breakfast. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the country will put the defense industry into a warm time mode. He also announced the largest package of military assistance to Ukraine in the history of the country. Well, at last someone is starting to get it. Great Britain was always at the forefront of everything. First to introduce the parliament, first to have the industrial revolution, and first to fight against dictators in the past. The Great Britain is getting it now, even without Sir Winston Churchill. So again, I'm cheering you with this wonderful English breakfast tea. Long live Britain. The next news is from Russia's vassal state of Belarus. Now, we know that Belarus had a cutting-edge space exploration research program. I talked about it before a few months ago, and the program was called the Space Eggs or something like that. President Lukashenko scrapped the space program. Instead, he used to take that money that was financing the space program and build a new high-tech potato storing facility. Well, it's a fancy name for a potato warehouse. Well, okay, not just a potato warehouse. Please forgive me, Belarus, but a warehouse painted on the outside with air conditioning. That's pretty darn good with air conditioning, you know. You understand that that's a serious replacement of the space exploration and research program. You know, Lukashenko means business. But a few months later, we learned that it was a mere decoy. Not only he means business, he's smart, he's sly. He tricked us. He put smoke over water, so to speak. In reality, Lukashenko channeled that money from space research into the development of new weapons. Last week, the president of Belarus publicly promised that Belarusian scientists will soon develop laser weapons. I wonder if it's going to be something like that. Well, I don't know, because it's a secret project. Pretty darn cool. And you know, advanced, you know. But don't laugh. Don't laugh. I think that for Belarus, the possibilities are endless now. Since it's establishing itself as a player in such cutting-edge scientific military research, now anything is possible in Belarus. Perhaps the next year, Lukashenko, of course, if he lasts until the next year, we're all mortal, you know. So perhaps next year, he will announce that soon Belarusian wonder scientists, well fed by potatoes stored in that wonderful new storage facility with air conditioning, will develop a laser sword, laser saber. Then, my friends, Lukashenko will really be unstoppable. The next news comes from China, and frankly, I haven't seen anything like this before. This is crazy. Check this out. Coconut-sized hail fell in China on the streets of the 14 million people city of Guangzhou. More than 140 factories were damaged. As we know, there's plenty of factories, and Guangzhou is one of the big factories of China. So more than 140 factories were damaged. Windows of buildings, storefronts, and cars were shattered, smashed. The wind speeds exceeded 20 meters per second, and there were dozens of fallen trees on the streets. That's quite unbelievable. Check this out. I watched this video a few times. Check this out again. Goodbye, blue car. Look at the size of that hail. It's just insane. It's like bombardment. And imagine the speed. That thing could kill a person in a heartbeat. Ganzhou. Unbelievable. Before the epic hail, there was a tornado, and people died as a result of that tornado, and 33 people received various injuries from the tornado and then the hail. Wow. Well, before I jump to the next news, I'd like to remind you that every single day I carefully select 9 news from Russia that I find important and make them available along with my analysis and comments to Inside Russia patrons. So if you want to receive daily updates of 9 important news, things like accidents, new laws, arrests, economic news, prices, you know, you name it. There's so many news come out in Russia, important news come out in Russia every single day. So if you want to stay on top of everything important, become the channel's patron at patreon.com, and I'll leave a link down below in the description. Thank you. The next news comes from Indonesia, and it's also Mother Nature's wrath. Is new eruption of the Ruang volcano. Another eruption is happening right now. In the last week's update, I showed you how the eruption looked, the previous one looked at nighttime in complete darkness. And this is how it looks like at the daytime. And that's pretty scary. It is reported that this volcano is spewing a column of smoke and volcanic ash to the height of 19 kilometers. That's about 12 miles. I wonder how locals aren't afraid of staying in such close proximity to the erupting volcano and not fleeing, evacuating. Well, they definitely have nerves of steel. The next news shows that international politics, economic policies, international sanctions, it's all actually very complicated matter. An international group of insurers complained that the price of restrictions on Russian oil, it's called oil price cap, imposed by the G7 countries actually led to the increase in the shadow market for maritime transportation. The statement from London-based International Insurers Club of International Group of P&I Clubs was presented at the parliamentary hearing in the UK on Tuesday. According to the insurers, the growth of shadow market is a direct consequence of the introduction of the sanctions regime, which imposes strict obligations to comply with the requirements on organizations operating within the framework of the G7 countries, while at the same time providing freedom to act lawfully outside this framework. Thus, the oil price cap is becoming increasingly impractical, and more and more ships and related services that are involved in this trade becoming a part of the shadow trade. That's the statement that was released by this group. According to the international group of P&I clubs, about 800 tankers have already left this international club due to the restrictions on the price of Russian oil. And you know what? It proves one point. It's a lose-lose situation for everyone. No one is benefiting from the war that Russia started. Russia itself is economically imploding, courtesy of Russia, well, courtesy of Vladimir Putin. Ukraine is ruined already, economically, infrastructurally, others are also suffering. Other countries, our businesses. What a useless, tragic, criminal war. Now, folks, I'd like to ask you a couple favors. Number one, please hit the like button now. Of course, if you like in the news update. Number two, please subscribe so you won't miss any further updates. Number three, please share this on your social media accounts. Reddit, among others, would be fantastic. And number four, probably the most important, please let me know which news you liked the most, or perhaps you disliked some. I need your feedback. I want to improve, and I would love to hear what you think in general. Thank you. The next news comes from the USA again, and that's another blow to the Russian economy. Well, not just the economy, Russian image, Russian stand in the world, everything. The US Senate just approved a bill to ban imports of Russian low-enriched uranium. The restriction will be in effect until 2040. The law is expected to enter into force within 90 days. According to the document, exceptions will be allowed during the validity of the restrictions until January 2028. That's according to the U.S. Department of Energy. That the U.S. Department of Energy will be able to issue import permits if there are no other sources of supply, which makes sense. In January 2024, the U.S. Nuclear Energy Administration announced that they intend to produce low-enriched uranium together with their allies in order not to depend on Russian supplies. According to the head of the department, joint production is planned to be established with Japan, France, Great Britain, and Canada. At the moment, the share of Russian supplies in the U.S. nuclear power industry is about 20%. Russia is to lose profit of $1 billion per year. And you see what's happening. This is another proof that, besides that the USA is professional, efficient, and means business concerning the sanctions, it's another proof that countries prosper by cooperating, not by isolating each other, not by invading the neighbors. When the countries come together, synergy is created. And this is exactly what the United States is going to do with its allies. And guess what happens after 2040? Imagine the situation when the United States is able to enrich low-grade uranium and come up with technology, means, capabilities, facilities, and a few countries come together and they have this long-term successful joint project. Let's say the ban expires in 2040 or 2030, whatever, the Senate votes back. We're not going to need Russia anymore. The opportunity is lost. Russia has lost the market for good. Okay, and this is just another proof that what Russia has done to itself is just stupid, unacceptable, unexplainable, and just stupid, dumb. The next news comes from Georgia, where people keep on protesting against so-called foreign agents law. In Georgia, the country, not the state, this proposed law is also called the Russian law. Foreign agents law was the first law in Russia that started paving the path to dictatorship. I've talked about it in my other streams. That was step number one. Now, Georgian parliament, major political majority political party called Georgian Dream, that is calling itself pro-Russian, is trying to get this very same law passed in Georgia. And Georgian people disagree. This is what's been happening in the streets of the country's capital, Tbilisi, in the last days. I reported the clashes began about a week ago, and they're still going on. Look what the police is doing to the protesters. As far as I see, the protesting is peaceful. But suppressing the protests is not that peaceful. You see the barricades, the bicycles, the signs. Holy moly. Pepper spray or tear gas is sprayed. That's pretty darn bad. These people, the Georgian people, they aren't armed. Look at this. They come in t-shirts with bare hands. Riot police in full gear. Reminds me of another country, a little up north. The grenades explode somewhere in the background. Georgian Dream, huh? Well, it's the wrong name. Should have been called Russian Dream instead. The next news comes from Saudi Arabia, and, it's about dreaming big. Have you heard of the proposed Arabian city of the future called The Line? It was introduced in 2017, and it looked fascinating, magnificent, the cutting edge of what the humanity has to offer. Check this out.
A revolution in civilization is taking place.
I guess this is a promo video for that city was made in 2017 or so.
The Line's communities are organized in 3 dimensions within 5-minute walk neighborhoods. Travel end to end in 20 minutes. Designed by world-leading architects, the Line is 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, 170 kilometers long, and housed within an elegant mirror glass facade. The Line is designed as a series of unique communities, providing equitable views and immediate access to the surrounding nature. At the heart of the globe's key trade routes, a place for commerce and communities to thrive. The Line, the city.
A human habitat. I don't even call that thing a city. Human habitat of 170 kilometers or 105 miles long. And it became known last week that the length of this smart city, the Line, was reduced from 170 kilometers to 2.4 kilometers, less than 2 miles. Initially, it was planned that 1.5 million people would live there, and now the forecast is only for, the plan, only for 300,000 inhabitants. If everything went as planned, the Line would be clearly visible from space. a line on the face of the globe, so to speak. And now the line has shrunk to the dot. The reason for that, well, it's simple. Saudi Arabia has run out of money. Many were laughing back in 2017. I discussed it with colleagues, was made splashes in Russia, that project, Saudi Arabia was, can't say promoting, but it was letting the world know that it had a project like that in the works. It was a competitor to Dubai, I believe. So many back then were laughing. The line was introduced. They were saying the project would be astronomically expensive to build and economically unsustainable. And they were absolutely right. I personally loved the idea of the project, and I'm a bit sad now. Astronomically expensive? Oh yes. Unsustainable? Double yes. Impossible to build? Most likely. But you know what? The Saudis have introduced something very new. A smart city in a form that has never been seen before. Something that broadens out our horizons. Not the new weapons to kill neighbors, but a place where 1.5 million people would live happily ever after. And I immediately think of Russia. How much is spent for this useless war so far? Dozens of trillions rubles already? How much will be spent in the future? How much more will be spent in the future? Hundreds of trillions, for sure. And the Russians could have built the country of the sun with that money. A man-made paradise. Instead, they're making missiles and bombs that are killing their neighbors, and own citizens are suffering too. So, Saudis, kudos to you for trying. And the next news is healthy, or perhaps unhealthy. Decide for yourself. The international biopharmaceutical company called AstroZeneca, you have all heard of that company, it, for the first time, has just admitted that its CV-19 vaccine can cause a rare side effect, thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome, whatever it is, but thrombosis is short enough. British newspaper The Telegraph reports citing court documents. Why court documents? Well, the publication explains a class action lawsuit was filed against the company, since the vaccine developed by AstroZeneca together with the University of Oxford caused serious harm to patients, some patients, or even led to death. Well, is it the news that AstroZeneca caused serious harm to some people? Hardly. Hey, even the producer of the vaccine, AstroZeneca, now is admitting that. There were public discussions in the past, media articles, accusations, etc. And we all knew that something was fishy. What about Russian Sputnik 5? I'm just curious. What happened to it? Was it stolen and tweaked by Russians from AstroZeneca? Was it a copy of AstroZeneca vaccine? They were accusations, accusations. They were suspicions in the West. Is Sputnik 5 still on the market? Does it cause any side effects? But that we probably will never know. It's not produced nor sold in Russia any longer. Gone and gone. Rendered ineffective by the very same people who were forcing vaccination of Russians using Sputnik 5 a few years prior. And the real news is that, now listen to very careful. This is the real news of this news. The main developer of Sputnik 5 vaccine, a senior researcher at the Gamaleya Center, 48-year-old Andrei Botikov was killed in Moscow not too long ago. He was strangled to death by his own belt. Now, there isn't anyone left to tell us the true story of Sputnik 5. Most likely, we will not learn anything about the truth about the vaccine and its story. There's no one to tell us. What an unfortunate coincidence. Or is it? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But if at this point you're wondering how you can help out this channel, well, you can do that by buying me a coffee or an English breakfast tea, just like one I'm drinking right now. I love it. You can do that at buymeacoffee.com. But, let's make a deal. You could do that only if you like today's news update. I'm going to put the link down below. Thank you in advance. And the last but not least news today comes from Kazakhstan and other post-Soviet republics. The victory parade in Kazakhstan in 2024 will be held only in one city, a city called Baikonur. On May 9th, Baikonur will host a concert, a rally, flower-laying ceremony, and a military victory parade at the main square called Lenin's Square. More than 70,000 people live in Baikonur, and most of them are citizens of Kazakhstan. And in the rest of the Kazakhstan, the V-Day parade and the usual celebration is cancelled. Now, what is the celebration, why it's important, and how is this possible? V-Day, May 9th, used to be one of those holidays, was like holy to all Russians, and not just Russians, to all people who lived in the former USSR. Because back in early 1940s, our country was invaded by the Germans, and we did fight a just war. We were defending ourselves, and we helped everyone to defeat Nazism. And it was celebrated, remembered, and it was considered one of the country's achievements. So it's used to be very, very important for Russians to celebrate May 9th. How is this possible that in Kazakhstan it's not celebrated in the country, but celebrated in just one city, town? You see, Baikonur is a part of the Baikonur Space Launch Complex, and it's been leased out to Russia until 2050. So it is technically a small part of Russia inside Kazakhstan. It has the status corresponding to the city of federal significance of Russian Federation. And this is why in Baikonur, the Russians decide whether to hold military parade or not. But for the rest of Kazakhstan, the military parades and the usual celebrations are cancelled. The official reason for that, strengthening the combat readiness of Kazakh armed forces, whatever it is, I don't understand, and saving money. I understand that well. Kazakhstan has not held a victory parade for 5 years in a row now. In 2020 and then 2021, events were cancelled due to the coronavirus pandemic. Before that, there was a holy event in Kazakhstan. There were parades, celebrations, and so forth. But, came 2020 and the coronavirus changed everything. In subsequent years, the Ministry of Defense responded that no parade was needed because there were other priorities. But we all understand what were those priorities. Not supporting Russian invasion to Ukraine. Kazakh president clearly stated his stand against supporting Russia, and he threw that right into Putin's face in his meeting in May of 2022. Now, in April, the Latvian parliament adopted an urgent law banning public events of May 9th. Latvian citizens are not allowed to participate in thematic celebrations, rallies, marches, and pickets. Estonia has imposed a fine of 1,200 euros, that's about $1,500, for celebrating V-Day. From May 5th to May 9th, all public gatherings related to the historical memory of World War II, marches with Russian flags and other Russian and Soviet symbols are prohibited in the country. A law discrediting Victory Day came into force in Lithuania on May 1st. According to the law, the victory ribbon, the Red Star, the victory banner, and other symbols directly related to World War II are banned. Victory Day was renamed in Uzbekistan. Now, the local Uzbeks celebrate Memorial Day remembering Russian aggression to Turkestan. Happened a long time ago, over 100 years ago. It is a celebration of national pride. Moldova has created a federal law banning celebration of V-Day on May 9th. Instead, they made May 8th the day of remembrance of the fallen. Armenia has renamed V-Day into the Day of Remembrance and Peace. And in Georgia, people have been trying to ban the holiday too, but with a little success because the pro-Russian political establishment party, the Georgian Dream, has been turning the initiatives down and blocking them. Do you see what Putin and his friends have done? They have alienated all people that have once lived in the USSR. The victory over Nazism was one of those few things that united us, the Soviets. Everyone fought. Russians, Moldovans, Georgians, Armenians, Uzbeks, Turkmens. It was our holiday. All our grandfathers fought in that war. And it's not like people in the post-Soviet countries have forgotten how the ancestors fought. It's not like they have forgotten what was World War II for us was. Well, I know, I'm in Uzbekistan, I'm seeing people every day, and I know their attitude. They making it public, they share. No one wants to forget their sacrifices and their adding to the win over Nazism. No, they all remember. What they don't want is that Russian world to come to them again and consume them. And May 9th, the V-Day, that holiday of the past, has been transformed into something absolutely different. It didn't used to be like that. It was the day of memory and celebrating peace. It was the day of never again. Now it's transformed into the day of the victorious Russian army, of Russian military victories, Russian and the Soviet and Russian empires. It's become the Russian world. And it's become the day of we can do that again instead of never again. And no one wants to be associated with that. Thank you, but no thank you. That's what Uzbeks are saying. And this is Putin and his friends' fault. They killed the old Russia with its traditions and holidays. And they have transformed it into the new Russia, Putin's Russia, the Russian world. They have rewritten Russian history. They have stolen the country from its owners, the citizens, and they are actively enslaving them. That country that used to be is no more, and the V-Day that was celebrated, and it was a day of peace in the past, is no more. And this is why it's being cancelled all over the world. Because the people outside Russia, in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Georgia, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Moldova, they are seeing what's going on. They understand what's going on, and they critically think. Friends, I double dare you. Watch your politicians. Keep them under control, because if you don't, they start ruining everything for everyone. Don't make your own mistakes. Learn from ours. Look at us Russians. Look what happened to us. Please, keep your politicians under control. And that's it for the world's news update today. Now I suggest that you check out another video I made documenting how I was leaving Putin's Russia in a hurry, because I only had 36 hours. And I filmed it. The link is right here. Thank you.